Hi, my name is Naya Patterson, and today we are going to be walking through the process for part two of our lab with hacking into our Keyoptics 1 level 1 machine. The objective of this lab was to gain root access into the system and create a new user account. So we'll see what that process looked like and the commands ran so we could get to that point. We are also going to dive into a discussion of the mitigation strategies presented for a privilege escalation attack, which is the type of attack we performed in this lab. And then we will also end our discussion with discussing the types of attacks that a company can be threatened by. We're going to define them, summarize what an attacker would potentially do with that attack, and then also categorize that attack as well. Alrighty, let's go ahead and get started. Alrighty, so here's our first command, and it looks familiar from part one of this lab. We wanted to run a basic ping sweep again using Nmap, just so we can re-identify our IP address for the Keyoptrix level 1 machine to make sure that it was the same, or if it changed, then we want to make sure we're aware of that. So to get to this point, we want to run Nmap space 192.168.56.0 /24. So we're running an Nmap scan on the entire network to see what machines are online and what it pulls. And we again found our Keyoptics 1 machine, and fortunately it does have the same IP address that we can work with, 192.168.56.110. And then also this is going to be a good basic ping sweep or a good command that we want to run initially, just because it will remind us of the vulnerabilities that we found from the last lab based off of the open ports that we see here. So the port that we're actually going to exploit the service for is going to be port 139. We found in our lab last week was that port 139 runs a program or a service called Samba, and we had discovered, or I had discovered a little later on, just through research, that Samba has some exploitables out there that we could potentially use to get into our Keyoptics 1 machine. So definitely this is helpful information to start off with. Alrighty, so command number 2, we're going to start the Metasploit program. So this is going to be the program that we're going to work within to try to identify what version of the Samba service the port 139 on the Keyoptics 1 machine is running. So to start that program, we're going to run msf console, all lowercase, and then the screenshot presented here is what the program looks like when it's launched. Next, we are going to run the specific script or scan or command for the scan that we want to use, so we can discover what version of Samba our Keyoptics level 1 machine is running. So that command is u space auxiliary /scanner /smb /smb underscore version. So we're going to go ahead and run that to get that scan queued up. And then the next thing that we have to do for the Metasploit program is we do have to set the IP address for the target host so it knows what to scan this, what IP address or what host to scan this command against, so we can find the version of the Keyoptics 1 machine or the Samba version that the Keyoptics 1 machine is running. So we have this command here, set space rhost, which just stands for target host in Metasploit language, space 192.168.56.110, which is the IP address for our Keyoptics 1 machine. And then after we enter this command, we're going to simply enter the next command, which is just run. And then we see the results here highlighted. We see that it found the version of Samba that the port 139 is running on the Keyoptics 1 machine. So we see that it's Samba 2.2.1a. So we definitely want to take that information and we're going to hop online to see what we can find about that particular Samba service. So from the last lab, we knew that this port was running outdated version of Samba. So whenever I just placed in Samba 2.2.1a, definitely I was able to see lots of results pop up immediately with exploits for this particular service or an attack for this particular service. So the website that directed our attention in our lab was this particular website because it has raw code for a remote code execution attack against a machine that has a port open that's running a service of Samba 2.2.a. So that just means any version of Samba prior to 2.2 .0 essentially. So definitely this is going to match what we need. And so yes, so in the first screenshot we see the website that we found this information from and the raw code as well that we wanted to copy into our clipboard. And then we're going to go back to our Kali machine, and we're going to pull up a new terminal window. We are going to use the editor within the terminal. So we wanted to go ahead and create just a brand new file so that we could copy all of this raw code into, save those changes, and then we have now a executable file that we can use in our next command. So definitely this is going to be exciting to see if this works. Alrighty, so next we want to load this executable file that we just created with the remote code execution exploit into the compiler. So we want to run the commands gcc space 10.c. 10.c is what I named the file, space switch o space 10. And then once we do that, you should get nothing as a result, which is a good thing. The next thing that we want to run, so the main command that I ran, I didn't include this second one, but the third one that we want to run that's most important is going to be the period /10 space switch B space 0 space 192.168.56.110. The reason why I didn't include the second command that you see on the screen is just because running period /10 is just going to bring up a menu of different types of attacks that we can try to use against the Keyoptrix 1 machine. So definitely this just explains why we're using the switch B. Switch B represents the brute force attack. So definitely we wanted to use that. And then the number 0 represents the fact that we're running a brute force attack against a Linux machine, which is the Kali or Keyoptrix 1 machine. So definitely that's all that indicates there. So once we enter that command, we get the following results. So we see that we are now running the terminal for our Keyoptrix 1 machine. It even gives us a successful message saying that it worked. And so now we can get to the other mission, which is creating a new user now that we have root access into our Keyoptrix 1 machine. So to create a new user, I ended up having to find this online. Of course, I didn't know it off the back of my head, but definitely I found the command that /usr/sbin/user add space switch ou space 0 space switch g space 0 and then space whatever you want your username to be. So in this case for the lab, we named it in Patterson. That's my first initial, my last name. And then we also want to set a password for this new account that we have created, so that to set the password, the next command you'll want to run is just going to be PASSWD, so passwd space in Patterson or whatever you named your new user account to be. And then that's where it'll allow you to create a password for that account. And then it'll give you a successful message after you confirm the new password. And then that's where we see in the screenshot off to the left, we see those commands that we ran to create this user account. And then off to the right is the interface for our Keyoptrix Level 1 machine. And now we see me entering my username that I created and then the password I created for the account, and now I am into the machine with this account. So that concludes our lab, and this is specifically a privilege escalation attack that we have. Alrighty, so now that we have walked through our lab for the Keyoptrix 1 machine and getting root access into that machine and creating our user account, let's go ahead and discuss some of the mitigation strategies that we can use against a privilege escalation attack. That is the type of attack that we used against our Keyoptrix 1 machine to gain root access. So first, we have implementing strict access control policies, and this is going to prevent access to sensitive files, or at least limit access to sensitive files when we have a system like this in place. Next, we want to consider deploying an IDPS. And what this stands for is an intrusion, prevention, and detection system. So they have an IPS and an IDS, and then they also have a system or application that involves both. But for overall purposes, it's just going to be used to monitor suspicious activity happening on any machine on the network. Next, we are going to want to consider auditing the systems that we use for vulnerabilities and then monitor user activity on those systems. So this is just going to try to give us a better overview to detect any signs of privilege escalation so we can catch it early before it happens. And then lastly, the last consideration is making isolated environments to run services and applications on. This can limit the impact of a successful attack by containing it within a restricted area, for lack of better words, so it doesn't spread to the rest of the network. All right, and now we get into the types of attacks that our company could face, or a company could face. So we're just going to start with number one. There's 8 that we'll go ahead and discuss here. So buffer overflow. A buffer overflow occurs when data exceeds the buffer's storage capacity, leading to adjacent memory areas being overwritten. So what an attacker can do with this particular attack is they can exploit buffer overflows by inserting malicious code into the overflowed memory space and then gaining control over the affected system. And the category for this type of attack is a memory-based attack. Then we have privilege escalation, which we kind of discussed, but let's unpack it a little further. So privilege escalation involves exploiting a system vulnerability to gain elevated access rights beyond what a user or process is authorized to have. So in this case, for our lab, that's what we walked through that process of. We were able to find an exploit or find a vulnerability on port 139 for the Samba 2.2.1a service. We found an exploit online that allowed us to create a executable file that we could run against our Captrix level 1 machine and then thus gain root access into the machine. So definitely that's all that is. Attackers use privilege escalation to gain root or administrator level access, allowing them to perform unauthorized actions on the system, sort of like what we demonstrated in the lab. I was able to create my own user account with my own password, and yes, since it's root access, it most likely has root capabilities, so administrator capabilities. So definitely just in the whole idea that I could make my own account. So definitely we want to be careful of that. And the category of this type of attack is an access control attack. Then we have our rootkits. So a rootkit is a collection of malicious software tools that allow unauthorized access to a computer while hiding its presence from detection tools. So say, for example, this is kind of after we've gained root access into a machine, or a hacker gains root access into a machine, then they might use a rootkit to try to complete the rest of their task or their mission on our system by going undetected. So it's kind of like they're in stealthy mode doing all the bad things on our network without us seeing it until it's too late. So definitely we want to be careful of these. So rootkits, the category for this would be a persistent threat, typically used in post-exploitation for stealthy access. All right, and then we have our Trojans. So Trojans are malicious programs disguised as legitimate software, tricking users into executing them subsequently, allowing attackers to control the infected system. Once installed, a Trojan can facilitate various malicious activities such as data theft, spying, or allowing further malware infections. So Trojans fit right into the category of malware because once it has been downloaded, then it allows other attacks to be executed from that. So definitely we want to be careful of Trojans. Alrighty, and then we have backdoors. So a backdoor is a hidden method of bypassing normal authentication to gain unauthorized access to a system or its resources. Backdoors can be installed by attackers or unintentionally left by developers and are often used to gain remote access to a system after the initial compromise. And the category for this attack would be access control bypass. And then we have our viruses. So this is kind of more generally speaking because there's several different types of viruses we can look into. But yeah, but definitely just a virus in general is a type of malicious software that attaches itself to legitimate programs and replicates itself upon execution, spreading to other files or systems. Viruses can perform various destructive actions such as corrupting data, stealing information, or making systems unusable. All right, and the category for a virus is a self-replicating malware, so overall malware, but more specifically, it's just spreads once it has been initiated. So we want to be careful of those. Alrighty, and then going to our last couple, so we have return-oriented programming. So short for the acronym for this is RPO. So RPO is an advanced exploitation technique that executes code by chaining together small sequences of instructions already present in a program's memory, bypassing traditional security defenses like non-executable memory. Attackers use ROP to execute arbitrary code without injecting new code, making it harder to detect and mitigate. And then the category for this type of attack is a code reuse attack. And then we have our common social engineering attacks, ones that we probably face every day without knowing it. So, social engineering attacks manipulate individuals into divulging confidential information or performing actions that compromise security, typically through deception or psychological manipulation. So, these attacks exploit human behavior, such as trust or fear, to bypass security measures. Common examples include phishing, pretexting, baiting, and tailgating, things like that. And then the type of category for this attack is a human-based attack. Alrighty. So these are the resources that I use for this particular presentation. I do appreciate your attention, and I will see you in the next video.